having an ability to communicate with people is key, because you need to build up that relationship and that rapport with the subject matter experts that you're talking to or communicating with, in order to get the information from them to then build documentation or whatever technical content you need to build in order to serve the user needs you need to serve.
Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast, where 𝐊𝐞𝐲 of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day and good morning, everyone. Our guest today in Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast is Jonathan Glassman, Senior Technical Writer at GitLab. Welcome, Jonathan, to Knowledgebase Ninjas. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, terribly good, thank you. So before we start digging further into your documentation process and other aspects, just help us to understand a little bit about yourself and how did you initially get into this journey?
Sure. So, so back in the day, I was working in the UK insurance industry, and although it was a good job, I had a good team. Fundamentally, I realized I wasn't happy. This was when I was in my late 20s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through a career change process, and discovered sort of that technical writing as a career aligned with me, aligned with my goals, my skills, my values, etc. I hadn't really heard of the profession much before that. It was only through that sort of research process that I actually understood what it was. And so I thought, well, I really want to get into this. So how do I do that? So I created a secondment in my employer at that time as a technical writer on a project team. And then from there, I managed to get some experience and get that experience down on my resume, on my CV. So then I went to work for another company as a sort of more like a legal technical writer.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of working on legal documentation. And as part of that role, I was able to do some software documentation. I found I enjoyed that a lot more than the legal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I managed to move to the UK government digital service and start working on software documentation full time. And that was 2017. And then more recently, I've moved to GitLab as a senior tech writer.
Great. It's a great journey is what I can understand, Jonathan. So well done from where you started and where you are now. Now, can you help us to understand a little bit about a few essential technical skills that a technical writer should possess according to your experience so far?
And I think it does vary from job to job. I think for me, the key thing is being able to communicate with people. So, we might touch on this a bit later. Fundamentally, to be a good technical writer, it can be quite tool agnostic. If you're curious and engaged and professional and pleasant and polite, and you have you are open to learning and open to trying new things, I think you can, fundamentally you can do well most jobs, let alone most technical writing jobs. But having an ability to communicate with people is key, because you need to build up that relationship and that rapport with the subject matter experts that you're talking to or communicating with, in order to get the information from them to then build documentation or whatever technical content you need to build in order to serve the user needs you need to serve. That, I think, for me is the key thing, and it's looking for people who can build up those relationships regardless of the method of communication used. So for example, at GitLab, we're 100% remote. So we use we use a process, it's called dog fooding, where we use the tool to build GitLab. So everybody uses GitLab, the tool, to build GitLab, the product. The vast majority of the work that we do is in GitLab, the tool. So whereas previously at the government digital service and other jobs I've done, I would be talking face to face to a subject matter expert, interviewing them, pair writing, etc. In GitLab, I'm using the tool itself to comment on people's contributions or drafts and going back and forth with them within that merge request or within that issue, or also on Slack if need be. So that is a different aspect to the communication sort of skill, I think, in that you're not talking face to face with them. most of the time.
Mhm.
Which I always, I fully admit I always personally preferred. I preferred to be in the office. I preferred to talk face to face with people. Of course, since the pandemic, I had to learn to be better at working remotely. And then since moving to GitLab, of course, I've been 100% remote.
Mhm.
It takes a different type of it's a different aspect of the same skill, which is okay. Well, I have somebody I need to work with, and I'm doing it remotely. I'm doing it via typing. So of course, you lose, for example, say tone, or you can lose tone. When you're writing down words rather than having a conversation like we are, you have to make an effort to build that rapport, build that positive working relationship, I think more explicitly when working remotely,
That's very
because
true.
face to face, it's not like it's easier, but it can be, I think, because I think it can be easier face to face than remotely.
Absolutely,
And so
yeah.
you have to be very mindful and careful of the way that you communicate remotely in all aspects, either like this on Zoom or whatever video conferencing software that you use, or using a tool or using Slack or something. So it's building that positive working relationship to then collaborate with somebody to produce content, documentation, whatever it is that you're producing that serves that user need. That to me is a mark of a good versus a great technical writer, regardless of where you are, whether you're remote or in person or what you're working on. I think for me, based on my experience and based on what I've seen, recruiting in the past as well, having somebody who's great at that communication aspect is absolutely key. It's a terrible cliche as well, I think, at this point, but of course, attention to detail. We all make mistakes, and of course, perfect is the enemy of good. I say perfect is the enemy of good enough, rather. But attention to detail at the fundamental level. And that's interesting, actually, because again, at GitLab, because it's all 100% remote, it's not just attention to detail in terms of paying attention to a style guide. It's also attention to detail in terms of making sure you correctly follow workflows, because the workflows are what help make the all remote setup work.
Easier. Okay.
So, yeah.
So am I correct in saying you give more weightage to the soft skills than any other aspects from a technical writer?
For me personally, yes. I think that it's a temptation, especially when you're recruiting. It's a temptation to get too focused on the hard skills, and even the words on somebody's CV or resume, like, oh, I have this skill. For example, back in the day, I used to use Adobe FrameMaker when I was working at the company previous to GDS, which was Visa. Personally, I didn't like FrameMaker, but other people did. I could recognize it had good points and bad points. Having used other tools since, I found that I personally liked FrameMaker more less than other tools. But it didn't stop me being able to learn it and apply it and use it, because you have the mindset of, okay, I've got to use this. I've got to learn how to use it. I've got to apply it. So I think most people, personally, I believe that most people can learn to use most pieces of software or whatever technical skill you need to use with enough practice and training. And that's completely possible. I think that having really good soft skills will smooth that journey, both, in terms of your general professional life, but also in terms of, okay, well, if you have somebody who maybe is less open to learning new skills as a general principle, if they come into a job and they don't have a certain piece of software on their resume, like CV or experience in that, having a non-optimal mindset will make it harder for them to learn that software, and therefore harder for them to then start contributing and adding value as quickly as possible, which is of course what we're all there to do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, personally, I think, having the really good soft skills, having a really good way of communicating, a really open mind in terms of learning, being very good at building up positive working relationships, having, good attention to detail, being engaged, being reliable, all these things, these will help you to learn whatever hard skills you need to learn. And you can always learn those hard skills, I think.
All right. Now, we spoke a lot about the skills required for a good technical writer, and you did touch base very, very briefly on a couple of tools that you either liked or disliked, and either you used in the past. So can you share a few more points on the tools that you can recommend to our audiences in order to help build their soft skills and the hard skills that's needed for a technical writer?
Well, I think in terms of tools, I mean, I'm not saying I'm biased, but I would say that top of my mind at the moment is Git, not necessarily GitLab or any other particular implementation of it, but just getting an appreciation of and knowledge of Git, how it works. And also, I think very much trying it out in the command line rather than using a particular tool or a particular GUI. Use a GUI, of course, to get your head around it. I'd say personally, I believe that being able to use Git in the command line is a very good transferable skill at the moment. That will stand you good stead in quite a lot of place. In terms of technical writing software, I'd probably go with something. I'd go with, this is probably a very popular answer, Docs as code. A lot of places need Docs as code. That's not so much a tool as it is a, you implement Docs as code as a philosophy using a tool. Looking into Docs as code, looking into what tools you can use to implement that, understanding how it works, and then just choosing a tool and running with it. I think that makes sense. In terms of my own experience, I used Polygo when I worked for an AI company. That was good. It was an intuitive tool. I liked, I also they were very responsive when it came to help and to support. So of course that's very important. I've used Madcap Flare or with my on my own sort of self-study. Again, very, very useful. I especially like their snippets functionality. Although it's been a few years since I've used it, so they might have changed it. So apologies if my information is out of date. Like I said, with FrameMaker at the time, it had good points and bad points. I don't want to badmouth any particular software. Just say that personally, I didn't like it. Again, I think I have to make the point that I think from a mindset point of view, be tools agnostic. If I had to name a couple to really focus on, I'd say understanding and be able to use Git in the command line, and also see how it works from a GUI perspective. Understand and use Docs as code, and again, see how you can implement that. Because Docs as code isn't just about a tool; it's also about a workflow, and it's also about a culture. So you can try your best to implement Docs as code using a fancy tool, but if the culture of your organization doesn't support it, then I think that's a recipe for frustration. But at least understanding how it works, understanding how other people have used it and implemented it, either through, for example, Write the Docs is a very, well-known documentarian software, not software, documentation resource and community. So, there's a lot of talks on that about how to implement Docs as code. I would definitely recommend all that. That is very important, I think. And I think it's the, I think at the moment it's, how can I use it? It's like the current meta, I think, in terms of technical writing. Like Docs as code is very much a desired skill across the board. I don't know what'll come next, or if anything will come next for a while. We'll see. But yeah, I'd say Git and Docs as code is not in terms of tools, but in terms of technical skills to focus on and understand how to implement.
So let's go to the rapid fire question, Jonathan.
Sure.
Who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
Well, in general, I mean, I smile because they're my friends. I've been really, really lucky in my career to have worked with some just brilliant people, not just brilliant technical writers, but excellent human beings. It sounds like a cliche, but it's, I'm being true. I'm being authentic here. When you have colleagues who are inspiring in who they are and what they do, it makes you want to be better. So you can be, I guess, almost worthy of them, worthy of their respect, worthy of their investment, their time. They've absolutely and definitively made me a better technical writer. In terms of specifics, I'd say the technical writers I've met and worked with at GDS and at GitLab have been just so good. In terms of their soft skills and their hard skills, I've learned so much from them, especially on Git. And yeah, they've been brilliant. I mean, if I had to name names, I'd say my managers at GDS, so Jen Lambourne, Rosalie Marshall, Laura Hiles, Laura Hiles, I should say, sorry. Mispronounced the name there. Sorry, Laura. At GDS, they were all brilliant in terms of coaching, leadership, management style. When I became a manager, when I was briefly a manager, I looked to them for inspiration. How should I act in this situation? I'll look to them as my North Star. In terms of technical skills, the guys at GitLab are so smart. They are intimidatingly smart. And I'm learning a lot from them.
So thank you to all your colleagues and mentors who's been supporting you all these
Absolutely.
Years. Again, you have shared quite a lot of useful information in terms of tools. But when it comes to documentation resources, are there any specific websites or blogs or any particular person you go quite often to gather updates and most recent information? Some documentation related resources, please.
I mean, I'd say the Write the Docs community is fantastic. The Write the Docs website is fantastic. If you can go to the Write the Docs conferences in person, I mean, if your resources allow you that, that's brilliant. If not, they're all available online after they are after they are recorded, rather say, sorry. So the Write Docs community is just full of really smart people doing really good things, and they're really good to learn from, to see further resources, to keep in touch with. Apart from Write the Docs, I think I'd rather be writing by Tom Johnson.
Yeah,
I like his writing style. I like that he's very prolific in his output. So that's, I mean, just as somebody who wants to learn, that's very reassuring, because it means there's, I think, there's probably going to be another post, so that's great. And he tries different things. Like, for example, he did quite a long piece on how to measure value of documentation, which is a huge thing for technical writing. It's a classic question. Of course, we've all I'm sure a lot of people will have had the uneducated or incorrect sort of steer of, we'll just look at your word count or your page count or however much you produce. Well, yeah, I could be producing a lot of bad words, but that doesn't mean that I'm producing anything that's useful. So he did a large part on, like, how to measure and attach value to documentation, which I think is important for every technical writer to understand and think about at some point in their career, because you will be asked that question. You will be asked to demonstrate it, especially, I hate to say this now, especially like at the moment we're seeing, a lot of redundancies in the tech space. There've been some pretty high profile, massive job losses recently. I wouldn't say that it would necessarily stop anything from happening, but at the very least you can have all your ducks lined up in a row to say, well, we provide X, Y, Z amount of value, be it in terms of saved hours on support, or if you can attach a monetary value to it through an agreed KPI, then that would be useful too. Just have that ready to go, because if you're part of a large company or even a small company, they have to justify people's existences, which is a shame. Having that ready to go is, at the very least, it's not going to hurt your case.
Yeah. Thank you. So once again, a big shout out to Tom Johnson and Write the Docs community. My last question to you is, what is that one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Look up the phrase technical writer, because you'll end up doing it one day. Documentation related advice, I mean, I guess at a higher level, write down everything that you achieve at your job, because it makes it easier when it comes to review time. I mean, it sounds a bit mercenary, but unfortunately that's the world we live in. Documentation related in general, having a good attention to detail will help you so much in life, so make sure you get that nailed down.
So more attention to detail, and just keep looking out for the best opportunities. Fantastic. You have shared quite a lot of resources for our audiences to take back home and digest. Is there anything else I missed to ask you today in this episode that you would like to share?
No, thank you. It's been great fun. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Once again, we really appreciate your participation in this Knowledgebase Ninjas podcast. Have a lovely day and good luck with all your future projects.
Thank you, and the same to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledgebase Ninjas Podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.